What is going on, Kaulignation and NASCAR fans alike? I'm Sean, he's Ryan, and we're back for the first time in a long time. But I will preface this by saying, given both of our busy schedules, especially that guy's busy schedule over there, weekly is probably not possible going forward, but we will have more content going further, more regular content. And we got an interesting bag of topics to talk about today. Today's episode will be centered around Kaulig Racing. And then the next episode we do, I'm not saying there won't be Kaulig Racing talk, but we're really going to take a look at NASCAR as a whole, what the new charter deal might look like, and what the season looks like going forward. So you can probably expect that one in a couple of weeks. What's going on, man? Long time no talk from doing it.
Yeah, it's been quite some time. It's been I know we did an early season discussion, and we planned on doing a few of these over the last couple weeks and months, and for whatever reason, our schedules just haven't lined up, and my schedule over the summer is going to be really busy, but I am super excited to be back. I'm super excited to talk racing. It's been a long time. Just got back from the Indy 500 a few weeks ago, so my favorite time of the year is right now, and let's dive right into it.
So Sonoma has just wrapped up. We've had back-to-back road courses, so that's always fun, and we have many more road courses to come. I believe we have, is it 3 in Cup and 4 in Xfinity, or is it 8 road courses in Xfinity? I can't remember if it's 7 or 8.
I think it's 7, but we got plenty more to go.
Yeah, so a lot more to come. So why don't we just start with this, man? How are you feeling? And, I don't really want to divide the topics into, Xfinity and Cup. I'd rather just sort of talk as a whole. How are we feeling about Kaulig Racing? Not their future, but what they have done or not done this year across the two main series.
Yeah, I would say from the Cup perspective, I think they've been about right where I expected them to be. Maybe even slightly better than I expected them to be. Certainly not great. They're still one of the bottom 3 teams in the owners' points. But considering the driver lineup that they went with this year, how last season went, the performance has been okay. Better than I thought. Certainly more room to get better. But the cars are capable of running, as we saw this weekend, close to the top 5, top 10 on a consistent basis when they get the setups right. So that's encouraging. Now the Xfinity side, we're coming off 2 wins with SVG, which is certainly a good thing for the team. I really do feel like the Xfinity program as a whole has been really struggling. AJ's had to fight tooth and nail for, top, honestly, I think he only has 3 top 5s all year, or 4 top 5s all year. So he's scrambling, really struggling just to get top 5. So the program needs to get better. I think we're really seeing now the effects 2 years down the road. We saw it a little bit last year, but truly this year, I think the Xfinity team is feeling the effects of the financial crunch. All the money that's been siphoned into the Cup program to keep it alive, to make it what it is, how they're doing, has really weakened the Xfinity program. And while I'm confident that AJ is going to safely make the playoffs, SVG has obviously won the last 2 Xfinity races he's in. The team is not where it needs to be right now from the Xfinity side.
So, I can't complain about SVG. He, in my opinion, some people might disagree with me here, given the Trackhouse alliance and the extra attention that gets paid to that car and the fact that he has Bruce, it certainly sets him in a position to succeed, which he needs, right? Like he's a rookie. He's going to struggle at places. It's a little frustrating that I feel like AJ has the B car. But at the same time, if I was running the team, I'm not sure I wouldn't make that decision either based on, what Trackhouse does for you. And, I'm sure they have in the back of their head that there's a possibility that S3G might end up with Kaulig long term. I have thoughts on that we'll address later. But the Xfinity side, yeah, I feel like AJ Allmendinger's out there trying to make, chicken salad out of chicken shit. I don't know any other way to word it. They're not very competitive. AJ's taking, basically a 12th to 15th place car at a lot of tracks because the Xfinity, let's be honest about the Xfinity field, deepest that it's been since AJ's been in that series, not just in terms of driver talent, but the equipment that's out there too. So I think AJ is doing all he can. I don't know if they've necessarily taken the approach of when he won the second Xfinity regular season championship, where they're just focused on getting as many points every weekend as they can. I think AJ's having to push the car harder, and we've seen some accidents because of that and some slip ups. And they need more. It's that simple. They need more. I don't have any complaints about SVG. And I'll say this: I was the anti Josh Williams guy at the beginning of the year. I've had a chance to. For those that are listening, you might not know. You probably don't know, but I had a heart attack, and it's one of the reasons we haven't been on in a bit. But and during my recovery time, I had a chance to really check out a lot of Kaulig stuff and a lot of Chris Rice interviews and the Kaulig shop tour, which I found very interesting. And quick notes on that: they need a new race shop. They do. Clearly, they're not intending to have one. They're building more onto this, but there's just not enough room in that place. It's not conventional for what goes on in 2024. It reminded me a lot of Petty Enterprises, if I'm being honest, where it's not that they don't have the stuff, but you want people working in an environment to succeed. And it doesn't feel like that to me, especially when you go tour the other shops. And I'm not just talking that crazy 23XL thing, which is Kaulig's never going to have. Clearly, you could put Kaulig and Trackhouse together, which, by the way, is not happening according to Chris Rice. And they wouldn't have a race shop like that. They're not going to have a Hendrick race shop. They're not going to have a Penske race shop. But they're not even on the level of what Stuart Haas's race shop is. And we'll try to dive into a little bit of that before we wrap up. But man, on the Xfinity side, they need more. They just do. And coming to the racetrack every weekend and unloading terribly has to stop. You have to find a way to unload good at some of these places because you only get one practice session now. That's it. You get practice and qualifying. And a lot of cases in qualifying, it's not very long unless you're in a road course. And even with the road course, you're trying to only really use one lap to get your lap time up there so that you have more tires left for the second session. They unload horribly. I don't know what the problem is. I'm not an expert, dude. They obviously unload terribly in Cup 2, but that's kind of to be expected. But unloading as bad as they do in Xfinity, I don't really have answers for. I don't know if we run into a case of, I know last year they said it wouldn't get better till later on in the season because something was wrong with their cars that they've built. But man, we're entering JTG level territory here with the equipment failures, the electrical issues. AJ had it multiple times in yesterday's race when I was listening. Still found a way to finish, what was it, sixth?
Sixth is finished, yeah.
Impressive as hell. But it's happening at an alarming rate. Something is very wrong with the equipment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not going to go to the point where they're JTG in terms of the equipment. I don't think that's the case. But I definitely agree with you that they definitely have had a lot of gremlins, more gremlins this year than they've had in recent years for sure. And maybe some of that is, again, going back to their budget, where their finances are, how much money they have to dedicate to the Xfinity program. Now, they are a tier 1 Xfinity program, unless they come out and say they have been demoted from that. They were last year a tier 1 team. So they are getting plenty of Chevy support, but it's clear that they are still, from a financial standpoint, digging themselves out of the hole they built over the last 2 seasons. And I do think some of that has shown up in their race day equipment, shown up in some of the smaller items, like the radios. Now, admittedly, AJ wrecked his primary car at Portland, and they were scrambling to get the backup car going. And one of the things they overlooked was their radio. They got it resolved. They went out and raced, but it's definitely something that needs to be buttoned up. And I do want to touch on the fact that I do think that the devil's in the details, right? And stuff like that needs to be caught before you get to the track. And while I never, this is not my favorite thing to talk about, I do think, especially from AJ's performance this year, and honestly, if we want to go back and look over the last couple of years, the Alex Yance-led teams have simply not performed as well as the other Kaulig cars. We saw Alex work with Haley a few years ago, and I know I don't know who he was with last year, but he wasn't with the primary car last year. But those teams have not performed as well as some of the other programs. And you mentioned Schlichter, who's leading SVG's program this year. That was AJ's crew chief a couple years ago when he did win the points title. And it's clear that relationship worked quite well. And I do think that's been a benefit to SVG, that he's probably had the number one Kaulig Xfinity crew chief for this season. But the team as a whole has definitely not performed. But on the same token, I do want to reference the fact that, when AJ won his first Xfinity championship, he was over 100 points behind Austin Cindric going into the summer stretch, and he was able to make up those points over the summer. It's definitely something that's been pretty, common for AJ in particular, that he performs at his best when it gets hotter, when it gets slicker. These summer months tend to be his best months, and we're starting to get into that point stands, and I don't know where he is now after getting wrecked out of his finish on Saturday, but he was 70 or so points behind the points lead, so it wasn't insurmountable. Like that margin was a margin in which he could make up and still compete for the Xfinity Series regular season title. Now, I don't see it this year, but it's not out of the realm, and knowing AJ's skill set, he can get there. But I do think you mentioned SVG maybe having the A car. Some of that to me is the leadership of the program. But the other side of that is sponsorship. SVG is bringing in WeatherTech, and has Wendy's and a few other products, Quadlock. He's bringing in sponsorship, a lot of money, whereas surprisingly, AJ has not had as much primary sponsorship as I was expecting. Celsius has been on the car a lot, even Leaf Filter. So it's not been good.
On the sponsorship side of things, I don't know if you ever got a chance to watch that Kaulig Shop walkthrough, or Kaulig Race Shop walkthrough. But one of the things that comes up in that is sponsorship. And Kaulig does not handle any of SVG stuff. It's all Trackhouse. So anything that's coming in sponsor-wise, Trackhouse is doing it. Trackhouse only wanted to also run SVG 20 races. And Kaulig said it's a full season or nothing. So they haven't had to worry about that. They did mention that they have a new, I don't know what the technical name would be for it, but like new people who are pursuing sponsorships for them. AJ definitely needs more. He should have more. On-track results should matter. But the flip side of that is this. Just because we're short on time here, we only got about 15, 20 minutes to go. The cup averages, dude. Emmerich, 23. AJ, 11. Obviously, AJ's race at a lot of places that he's good at. And the rest of the 16 car, 30th. I'm sorry, but when you're an owner and you decide to go cup racing, not just Xfinity racing, but cup racing, and you make that financial commitment. And I understand that they did it for Justin Haley for many years. Haley brought in almost nothing on their cars ever. AJ hasn't been that case. He has been able to bring in a little bit. Do you want your team to be looked at like a laughing stock, or do you want to get fucking serious, pardon my language, and go out there and produce the results? And by the way, having Derek Kraus in the car, and I've grown to like Josh Williams a lot, and I'm okay if he's with Kaulig long term as a third Xfinity car. But those two guys, I can't really bash Ty Dillon because he's raced a couple of times and his finishes haven't been too bad. They've been above the average, actually. You can't have that in your cup program. You don't grow it at all. I don't care what minor sponsor deal that Derek Kraus is bringing in, that they give a discounted rate just to have a different sponsor on the car to get a little bit more money in. Doesn't matter. You made the commitment to go cup racing. Don't fucking put your name on the car for Justin Haley. And I love Haley. Still cheer him on. And then not do it for the one guy who, if you watch that Kaulig Racing shop tour, they flat out say, AJ Allmendinger is the reason for our success. This is a team that AJ Allmendinger has built. Not Ross Chastain, not Justin Haley, not anybody else, AJ Allmendinger. So put your fucking money where your mouth is, Matt Kaulig, Chris Rice. And if you can't find sponsors to get on the car, or you can't find discounted sponsors to get on the car for Allmendinger, as much as I enjoy him running up front in Xfinity as much as he can, hasn't happened nearly as much as it should have this year. You want to grow your program? You don't have any blue chip prospects, none whatsoever. They might land a Stewart Haas Racing guy, doubt it. You signed AJ to an extension that can go within either series that goes to at least 2027 with the possibility of 2028. Put his ass in the car because he's the only driver you have to give you proper feedback on how to develop your fucking race team. Pardon my language, getting a little excited. The 30th place nonsense does nothing. They're learning nothing with those guys in the car, man. It is a waste of time. And if you're not going to do it, I'd say sell the charter. But with this Stewart Haas Racing thing, your charter's not worth nearly as much now.
Yeah, the charter's not worth selling, and they've been pretty clear last year. They've been very clear this year. They have no intention of selling. Now, we kind of speculated that they might sell one charter. We speculated that maybe they would, combine forces and join up with Trackhouse and a merger. It seems like both of those options are off the table, which is fine. I'm very content with Kaulig continuing to move forward if they are serious about their commitment for the rest of this season, going into 2025, that they're, as Chris Rice said a few weeks ago in Door Bumper Clear, that they're in a transition year, right? That was his word. Well, we talked about this last year. That transition is ridiculous that it even had to happen. But if it's true and they are in a better footing going into 2025, then there's no reason AJ should not be right back in that Cup car full time. If he's not in that car full time, then they better have somebody else in that car full time, whether it's SVG or Zane Smith or one of the Stewart Haas drivers that's looking for a ride. I'm okay with any of those options, truthfully. And we don't know how the Trackhouse situation is going to play out with their third charter, if they choose to go with SVG in that car or bring over Zane Smith. But what we do know is that their deal with Spire has expired, and Spire will no longer be supporting Zane Smith going forward, which means one of the two will be looking for a ride next year. And I could see one of them being with Kaulig and the other one with being with Trackhouse. If they go that route, that's okay too. But they definitely need to put somebody in that car that's not Derek Kraus. And Derek Kraus is a fine young guy. He can be the sim team. Ty Dillon, I vehemently didn't like. I still don't want him behind the wheel. He was okay. But if they're willing to put somebody in, whether it's a agreement with Trackhouse, or they go sign a Stewart Haas driver, or for the love of God, put AJ back in that seat where he belongs, that car will perform. It's shown that it's capable of performing with the stat you just showed. Again, they are cherry-picking AJ's rides. He's clearly running at his best tracks. That really helps his average. I understand that if he raced at Martinsville and Bristol and all the other short tracks where we suck at, his average would be much lower. AJ but it's still good.
AJ finished forget what maybe it was the last year he did Bristol. I can't remember.
He did do Bristol, but he didn't do Richmond. He didn't do Martinsville. Some of the other tracks, right?
Those tracks that Kaulig can't even come close to figuring out.
Yeah,
which is really frustrating. That like you would hope. We were talking about this 2 years ago, man, and they've made zero progress at any of those.
Missing the boat.
By the way, Martinsville is one of AJ's best tracks, and they still can't figure it out. That lets you know how far they are off the setup for those tracks. And I'm glad that you brought up the Trackhouse thing. I wasn't sure if the Spire thing was confirmed or not. But I'll say this. No. Sorry, but like, no. And as much as I love SVG, like I do, for me, a dream scenario would be Hemrick goes back to Xfinity, because I think he can compete down there. I do. And you have AJ and SVG in the Cup Series. And SVG is going to struggle. But guess what? You're going to go to a place, and I think it's rumored that the Cup schedule is going to go up to 6 road courses again next year, like it was last year. Guess what? At those 6 places, you're going to have 2 guys that are going to give you a shot to win. Hemrick does not give you that. Zane Smith does not give you that. And I'm a Zane Smith guy, although he has really
struggled. He has been bad.
I think he's shown that he is not ready at this point. But then again, he went truck to Cup with very little Xfinity experience. But that doesn't do anything for Kaulig in the long term. If you're going to merge with Trackhouse, which Chris Rice denied, and even if they were, he probably still would have denied it anyways. I'm always leery on how much I listen to Chris now, given what happened last year. But I just feel that you need your guys. Enough of the cherry picking. You got to do. You chose to let Chandler go. You could have forced him to stay. Okay, it's that simple. Maybe you don't want someone who doesn't want to be there. But guess what? A contract is a fucking contract. And yeah, obviously we got paid a lot of money to let him out of it. But at the same time, you have nobody. AJ Allmendinger is a 42-year-old man with a kid who signed a way longer term deal than I think either you or I would have ever expected. Josh Williams is a nice guy to have. He's a great team guy.
Great team guy. He's the glue. His personality is important. I agree with
very much. I hope he doesn't go anywhere. But at the same time, he's a third Xfinity guy at most. Yeah. He cannot be driving Cup races.
No, absolutely not. And again, I didn't mind him getting 1 or 2, the cup of coffee, right? It is what it is. We can beat that horse till it's 8 feet in the ground. But we're past the point of no return on that front. But the flip side of that, and I think this is very important, and AJ has more or less come out and said this now, he's going to be in the Cup car for the majority of the rest of the season. They've gotten through the paid drivers, whether it was Josh or Derek or Ty or whoever else we've had in that car. I can't even keep track anymore.
Well, I was listening to
AJ will be in there for another 15 or so races, which is the majority of the rest of the season. So we are going to get now AJ between his Xfinity series and his Cup series. Is it the worst thing that he's getting 50 races in a Kaulig race car this year?
I think it's 52. 52 is the word that he said this past weekend, and
so that's not a bad thing. I understand where you're coming from with it. We do need him in a full-time Cup ride. That's where he belongs. But at the flip side, him running 52 races is not the worst thing in the world. And I also just quickly want to... You're saying we don't have a young guy in the wings, and that's true, we don't. But I think this is the opportunity, especially with... And again, there's a lot of hay that we'll get into in future episodes about the charter agreement. But what we're hearing is that the charter agreement's going to be limited to 3 charters going forward. And if that's the case, Trackhouse has 4 drivers, right? And I know what you're saying, Kaulig needs to be Kaulig, Trackhouse should be Trackhouse. But if there's an opportunity to put Zane Smith in the Kaulig car, the kid is only 23, 24 years old. He's a champion of the Truck Series. He has struggled. He's been the worst car in the Cup Series this year. There's not any sugarcoating that. But the talent is there. He is clearly a gifted racing driver. And if there's an opportunity to scoop him up as a potential full-time Cup driver, hell, even in the Xfinity Series, but I prefer Cup, I think you take it. that is somebody that you can't say, well, you know what, we're willing to struggle for a couple of years while you gain some experience. But the long-term payoff could really be there with a driver with Zane Smith if that situation comes to fruition. So I definitely think there's an opportunity there.
How, though? I don't know if you clarified that. Like, are you saying you're open to him coming in and being a full-time Cup guy for Kaulig as a Kaulig driver?
Yes.
Or are you open to him as a track house, just loaning him out? Because I'm not open to that option unless he's going down and running an Xfinity car for a year.
Well, again, the situation with the potential 3 Cup charters, and it sounds like, again, things can change. A lot of things have to go right or wrong, but it sounds like SVG is probably going to get that 3rd Trackhouse car next year. And if that's the case, Zane Smith has to go someplace. And if Trackhouse is willing to foot or partially foot the bill for next year, more power to him. I think that's not the worst thing in the world. But I could see there being an opportunity where we say, hey, Zane, we'll sign you up for 2 years, 3 years. Come on down. We'll give you that ride. And they should take it. They should jump on that situation. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm sure that won't happen. But, I do think there's at least an opportunity to go that route, knowing the situation with Trackhouse, with Spire, and honestly with Kaulig needing a full-time driver. And we do know Zane does bring sponsorship with that Advent Health program. So I'm just saying that this is speculation. We can touch on more down the road. I want AJ in the full-time car next year. And preferably I'd like AJ and an SVG or an AJ and a Zane. But, the cars are proving, especially at the Cup level, I've been surprised. I think the Cup program isn't as far off as we thought they might be. And you put them in a chance to be competitive and just grow. There's no reason they can't be competing top 15s on a regular basis. I think the cars are capable of doing it right now if you put the right driver behind the wheel.
The right driver behind the wheel is the key statement on that one, and that is you can't keep cycling guys. You can run a 3rd car when you want. Like if AJ's going to stay in Xfinity, you should be running AJ at every single road course. You should be footing that bill if no one else is going to foot that bill. I noticed Kaulig doesn't use trophy hunting nearly as much this year, and that's probably the appropriate step to do with some of the changes that have happened because they're really not doing that. But I got to fall on the other side of this with the lone driver thing. It doesn't interest me. It doesn't long-term benefit your team. And I'm very much still of the category that if things don't change, this team might not exist in a couple of years. Obviously it won't be imminent, but say what you want. There's warning signs everywhere that go, okay, until you start spending money again, we haven't seen it in a while. You failed to land drivers and sponsors that you claimed were going to come. And I'd love SVG and Cup. But I think we both know if you're Trackhouse and you're looking at, look, your number one goal is to win a championship, obviously, but you can't do that unless you make the playoffs.
Yeah.
SVG having 1 in 5 opportunities on a road course next year during the regular season to win a race. And, we know how he did in Chicago. I would not be shocked if he wins in Chicago with Kaulig this year. I just think he's so far ahead on a track like that than everybody else. That if you're Trackhouse, yeah, you're putting him in the car over a lot of other guys. I think Suarez won a race this year, right?
Suarez has won, yeah.
Yeah, so, say what you want about Daniel, but when you're winning, you're winning, regardless of how you're doing it. And we both know Ross Chastain ain't going anywhere. So, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We only have about 5 minutes left. I'll say this, man. I think that I'd love to hear that Kaulig is going to spend money and go get engineers and crew people and just any behind the scenes people they can from the tragic events that have transpired with Stewart Haas Racing. And honestly, what they land from that is going to tell you how serious they are. If they're landing, I know you don't hear a ton about behind the scenes people, but you should hear that Kaulig has signed a bunch of people to come on in and, grow their race team and help it head in a different direction. I'm not sure they're going to land one of the drivers. There should be interest in Chase Briscoe. There should be interest in Josh Berry. Even Ryan Preece, who you were all about, and he brings a little bit of sponsorship. There should be interest in a lot of these guys. I'm just not sure Kaulig's going to have the ability to land any of them unless you're paying. I think you and I talked off there a couple weeks ago that, hey, if you want to land the behind-the-scenes people, or whether they're what about Rodney Childers? Like
that's the splash,
right?
You get Rodney Childers and Josh Berry. Chalk it up, A+ off season, right out of the gate. I don't care what else they do.
Not Josh Berry. Even if you don't get a driver, to pull a guy like Childers into your organization is huge. But you're gonna have to pay out the ass. You're not Hendrick. You're not Penske. You're not even Roush Fenway. You're towards the bottom of the barrel, frankly. I'm not nearly as high on their Cup performance as you are. I think Hemrick has done a fine job. I said at the beginning of the year he'd be a 25th to 30th place car. Right now he's 23.08. So he's a little better than what I thought he'd be. That being said, he's not a lock for Cup next year. And if you haven't noticed, the Circle sponsor, has started to appear on
AJ's car quite a bit.
Allmendinger's car a little bit here. And I'm going to be interested to see how much more that happens either on a Cup level or an Xfinity level, because I think there are warning signs here where Hemrick either could find himself out of the organization or back in Xfinity. I think a lot's on the table. Here's the one move I would say that I'm interested in. I know Chris Rice is pro Chevy, but to me it should be about pro money and who gives you the best chance to win. Last year we heard Ford was desperately trying to recruit another team. It never happened. And now they're down a team. They just lost
4 cars.
Gone.
Yep.
If there's not at least a conversation happening between Ford, and I understand that Stuart Haas has been not good the last 2 years, but if there's not a conversation happening between Kaulig and Ford, or even other teams in Ford, Kaulig should at least be going, hey, so how much support are you willing to give us? How much money are you willing to give us? You need to be open to a switch to Ford at this point, because if they were desperate last year and now they have far less, they should be just as desperate this year.
No, I agree. I definitely would like to see them at least kick the tires on that, and just kind of to segue to the close here. That's the one thing I really want to see more of from Chris Rice and the organization, is that I know they have kind of preached this family atmosphere, and that has worked in the previous years as they kind of grew to what they've become. But this is a cutthroat industry, and frankly, the team itself has not performed at a level that's, it's just not good enough. The long and the short of it is just not good enough. And this is the opportunity with over 100 people out of work, that this is when you go and you spend money and you are willing to go get another engineer or 2 or 3 or a specialist or 2 or 3. And if it means cutting somebody loose at the end of the year to make it happen, they need to do it, because the performance needs to get better, and there is opportunities. The Stuart Haas had the opportunities to be much, much better than they have been the last few years. To me, it's not the staff. It was the lackadaisical ownership. So the talent, I think, is there, and if you're willing to scoop it up and pay some money to bring in some fresh eyes, some fresh ears, they need to take it. And the same thing with Ford. I wholeheartedly agree. I know Chris Rice is Team Chevy, very diehard Chevy. He believes the bow tie. But they should at least be having a conversation with Ford, because also think of it from this perspective. Ford is losing their Xfinity program. They got nothing.
They got nobody.
They got the Sieg, Ryan Sieg. That's it. So, you can sell them on Xfinity cars. You can sell them on a couple of Cup cars. To me, they probably won't do it, but they should absolutely talk about it, because that could be more money if Ford is willing to kick the tires and, invest what they would in a 4-car team into a 2-car team. That could make a world of difference. So I would definitely like to see Kaulig make more aggressive moves to be better. And again, I think the Cup program's been acceptable. They've been okay. They've been good enough. but it hasn't been good. Hemrick average finish at 23rd. He's 27th in points, I think, 26th in points. That's where I expected him to be, but it should be better. AJ's obviously running just fine, and if he runs the rest of the races, or the majority of the rest of the races, that 16 car is 31st in ownership points. If AJ's behind the wheel, I would expect him to creep pretty close to that top 25 point. To me, that should be the goal. And if they can end the year in that ballpark, obviously that's long-term, short-term, not where we need to be. But the cars are capable on any given weekend to run up front. And really, that's all you can ask for. The consistency is not there, but they are capable of running up front. They just need to do it more consistently. So that's the part that gives me, I guess, the most hope, is that they didn't completely fall off the map and then their best day is 28th. That's clearly not the case. They can still run top 10, top 5 when they get it right. So that's my positivity going into the rest of the season.
And I'll say this: I think what AJ does in that Cup car and what Hemrick does in that Cup car the rest of the way is really gonna, if Kaulig wants to be serious again about competing, it'll be interesting to see, because like AJ is not going to be just running at tracks that he's good at the rest of the way. So we'll see what ends up happening. I'm not saying he's going to get glowing results, but I do believe that car will be way more competitive than it has been when he's not in it. Clearly, there's a big difference between an 11th place average finish and a 30th place average finish. Look, the Stuart Haas thing, as we close up here, when you get an opportunity like that, it sucks that a bunch of people are out of work and now need to find new homes, and it'll be a life change for a lot of them. This is a very rare circumstance. If they're not willing to capitalize on this, whether it's drivers, whether it's a Rodney Childers, whether it's just a bunch of behind-the-scenes people that would obviously be more experienced and probably better than a lot of the people Kaulig has, then I think you can put the nail in the coffin, and how serious Kaulig wants to be about their racing program going forward, obviously, what they're capable of and what they're not. My hope is they're able to reasonably add to the program. If they don't add anything to it, then I don't think I need to spell out to any of you what direction it's heading. I hope it's a good one, because it's a lot more fun talking about positive things on this thing than negative things. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, though. Big thanks to Ryan for coming out and being a sponsor over at our other channel, Fandom Empire. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let us know what you want Kaulig to do moving forward. Yeah. Where can everybody find you, Ben?
Oh, well, I think going forward here as we really kick off the new season of House of Dragon, I'll be hanging out with you a little bit over on that channel. So catch us on the House of Dragon channel of Fandom Empire. And of course, you can catch us on Kaulignation, whether that's on our X account, Facebook accounts. We're trying to always interact with everybody that we can. So good, bad, or indifferent, we're passionate about it and we're willing to talk about it. Come and talk to us. We'll happily engage in conversation with you guys.
Have a great week, and in honor of Chris Rice, put a smile on that face.
That's right.